Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and today we're getting started with your brand new camera. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Oh, guys, welcome to 2018. Today is January 1st, the first day of the year, and we're starting off this podcast right today. I am so excited for you to be here today. You know, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance that maybe over the holidays you got something very special, like perhaps a new camera or a new camera to you, and now you are gung-ho about learning how to use this thing and getting started right away. So that is what we're going to focus on in today's episode. I'm so excited. So again, thank you for joining me today. I am your host, Raymond Hatfield, and one time I almost burnt down a cabin in Yosemite on an 8th grade field trip by throwing a cough drop into our cabin's electric heater. It's a pretty crazy story, and if we ever get face to face, ask me about it. I'd be more than happy to tell you the story, go more in depth. But that's not why you're here today. Why you're here today is that you want to learn more about your cabin. Sorry. You want to know more about your camera, and you really want to master this thing. You know that it has potential, and you want to use all of it to be able to take great photos of whatever it is that you're passionate about in life, whether it's your kids or your family or landscapes, or it's just a creative expression. It doesn't even have to be of people. Maybe it's still life. Maybe it's your pets. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is that you're passionate about, you want to learn how to use the camera as a tool to capture it exactly how you see it. So here you are, right? You just got a brand new camera, and I'm excited for you. I remember when I first got my first DSLR camera and how excited I was. I bought this thing used. It was a Canon XT. It was back in 2007. And I got it in the mail from eBay. I bought it used, and it didn't have a memory card. At the time, I didn't know what kind of memory cards. I really didn't know much about memory cards at all, right? So I had to go and order one online, and I had to wait another week until it showed up in the mail. This was the day, well, I don't think it was before Amazon, but I wasn't using Amazon as much as I am now. Or maybe at the time it was just books. It doesn't matter. I had to wait. So here I was with this digital camera, and I saw it. I could see the potential. I knew what it could do, and here I am stuck, not being able to do anything because I can't record any images. So I understand. You want to get out there and you want to start creating something meaningful right away. So that is what I'm talking about today. I'm going to help you do that with today's episode. So today I'm going to talk about some quick things that you can either change on your camera or that you can do with your camera to ensure that you can get a better photo, okay, in just 5 easy steps. So the first one, it isn't even a step because it's just kind of a no-brainer. This is the first thing that you should do when you get your camera. You're going to pull that thing out of the box, right? You're going to look at it, and at the top there's going to be a dial, and there's going to be a green box somewhere on that dial, and it's going to look like, hey, green means go, right? I should be in this mode. But that right there is the biggest mistake that you could make when you first get a brand new camera, because that is auto mode. And in auto mode, your camera makes every decision for you. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're not listening to it to find out why your camera's making decisions that it's making. You're listening to this podcast to learn how you can make the decisions to take better photos right away. So you don't want your camera to be making the decisions for you. You want to be making those decisions, right? So you need to change the dial right away. I mean, first thing that you should do is change that dial to M, which is manual mode, okay? And if you're worried about shooting in manual, don't worry. I have some information for you that I'm going to share at the end of the episode that's going to help you immensely, okay? But the first thing that you should do is change that dial straight to M. Start shooting in manual right away and learn how to take full control of your images. Okay. So the real number one thing that you should know about your camera, getting started with your new camera, is don't use the flash that's built in, okay? It's going to be tempting, right? It's going to be dark. You're not going to know. Maybe the camera's focusing or having trouble focusing in low light conditions, or your photos are just coming out too dark, and you want them to be brighter. So you think, well, the camera has a flash. I'll just use this flash. Or maybe it automatically pops up. Don't use that flash. It's more than 9 times out of 10. 99 times out of 100. I might even say 999 times out of 1,000. That flash will ruin whatever photo you're about to take. Okay? Very, very, very rarely does it actually aid in making a better photo. Typically what it does is it just produces so much flash that it exposes only the person in front, or the subject in front of your camera, leaving everything else too dark. It doesn't use flash the way that is natural to the eyes. You can tell when you look at a photo and you start studying photos, you can look at a photo and tell when flash was used. When it's on the camera. And that is the last thing that you want. You want to be able to look at a photo and think that it looks completely natural, regardless of if a flash was used or not. Oftentimes that is the goal of photographers using flash, is to make the photo look as natural as possible. Unfortunately, having the flash on the camera fire just doesn't do it. So step 1, do not use the flash that is on your camera. Later on, once you learn more about your camera and master or start getting more comfortable with its settings, you might be interested in getting a flash that can sit on top of your camera, but obviously it's an external flash. That works, okay? Oftentimes, the reason why the flash on the camera doesn't work very well is because it's angled directly at the person. And you might think, well, yeah, I'm taking a photo of a person in front of my camera, so where else would I want the light to be pointed? But when you think about it, if you angle the flash that's on top of your camera towards maybe a white wall to your right, suddenly it illuminates the white wall, making the entire wall a light source, creating a much, much softer light source on your subject, making it look much more pleasing and more natural to the eyes. But that is something that you might get into later on down the road. Okay, step number 2 for getting started with your brand new camera is just learning how to see the light. So this one isn't necessarily what you can do on your camera to take a better photo, but it's more important than almost any setting, I would say, because once you learn how to see the light, then you know how to control your camera to take the photo that you want. Now, I understand this one is a hard one, and in fact, I still struggle with it. I think a lot of people struggle with this one, right? Seeing the light doesn't really make sense when you say it to somebody who doesn't know what they're looking for. Maybe you're thinking right now, well, okay, like the sun makes light. What are you talking about? But there's things that you should know, like how shadows play, or how they add to the photo, or how they take away from the photo, or how they ruin your photo. So oftentimes, just go back and start looking through some of your old photos. Look at pictures of people's faces and try to figure out where the light is coming from. More times than you would think, people have half of their faces lit by like the sun, and then the other half is in dark shadow, and it creates some weird patterns of light on their face. And oftentimes, as somebody who's not looking for the light, they just see a picture of somebody's face and say, okay, yeah, it's somebody's face, and that's it, and then they just move on. But now that you really want to put in time to become a better photographer, seeing light is one of the most important things that you can do, because photography is light. That's all that you're doing. You're capturing light. So learning how to manipulate it is essential to taking a great photograph. So just some simple things that you can be aware of is that if you're taking a picture of a subject, make sure that the sun is behind your subject. As when if you're watching me on YouTube right now, which I'm not sure if you are, I have a light behind me and it's shining right at me, and it is creating an outline on my head, separating my figure right here from the background. My the darkness of my hair doesn't blend into the darkness of the curtains behind me because I'm being backlit right now. Think of that as the sun. If you have the sun behind somebody, they're being illuminated from behind. They're getting this nice backlight while their face is not getting any weird shadows or streaks of light from the sun, making the light on their face even and soft. So always try to keep the sun behind your subjects, okay? Now, what if you're inside? You're obviously not getting any direct sunlight. So when you're inside and you go to take a picture, people have this tendency to go stand in front of windows, like for group photos. I guess I get it, right? Like, oh, there's lots of light over here by this window. Let's come over here and we'll take a photo. But having somebody or a group of people, your subject, whatever it is, standing in front of a window makes for terrible photos because if you're not shooting in manual, the camera is going to be confused and the brightness of the window is going to make the camera want to darken down the photo. So if you're shooting in manual, you can get this to work, but oftentimes the light is just going to be very poor on the person's face as there's not going to be enough of it. So just simply rotate yourself and the person who you're taking a photo of 180 degrees. So you stand in front of the window and now you're pointing your camera in towards the house and the person is standing in front of you. So now there is a giant light source, a window, in front of them illuminating their face, making nice, soft, even light. And it is just, it's just much more beautiful that way. So remember also, while you're indoors, pay attention to lights that are coming from directly above, shining down, creating mixed lighting. It can cause bags under the eyes and just isn't very flattering. So this is where you start to learn how to see the light, right? Light from above doesn't look good. Light from behind can look good, but if you're inside, it's more powerful to be in front of, to have the light source illuminating your subject, only because the amount is less, and it's also, the window makes it a larger light source than the size of the sun. Okay. Let me know if you're keeping up with me there. I think that might have got a little bit technical, but the point is just learn to just look for the difference between like where shadows are and where light is, okay? And study photos. Do that as well. Okay. Tip number 3, what you should do is you should learn how to change your angle, okay? Oftentimes, and this happens all the times when parents are taking photos of kids, every one of their photos, the camera is about 5 feet 6 inches from the ground, and the camera is pointed down at a child, right? That's not interesting. That's not interesting at all. Because that's your everyday view. You see that every single day when you look down at your kids. So to really make the photo more interesting is to change your angle. So with kids, the first thing that I would do is get on their level. Bring the camera down to eye level, maybe slightly above, but we're just talking inches, like 3 to 6 inches, not, 3 feet above the subject, looking down on them. Get on their level. It's going to be so much more engaging. They're going to feel like children. They're going to be interested in the camera because it feels like you're playing with them. And this happens with animals too, okay? So maybe you don't have kids, but you have animals. Think of them as the same in this situation. Just changing your angle makes your photos a little bit more interesting to look at because it's not the norm. It's not what people are used to when looking at that subject, right? Like I said, every parent is used to looking down at their kids. So suddenly, instead of taking a photo looking down at their kids where they've seen that photo every single day, get down on their level. Take a photo straight on, look them right in the eyes, make them look at you, and suddenly it's going to be very compelling and interesting to look at. The other thing is that a lot of times, especially with your first camera, it's going to have a little zoom lens on it. Don't zoom. Don't stand there and think, oh, I want to get, I'm trying to take a picture of this subject, but they're too far away, so I'm just going to zoom in. Don't do that. Don't do that. Get closer. Physically get closer. Use your feet to zoom in. when you think, oh, I'm just going to use the zoom, you get lazy real quick, and that will really start to hinder your progress as a photographer, taking better photos. So simply get closer, okay? When you get closer, you're going to be filling the frame with your subject, making it larger, and that's going to be more compelling, okay? The larger the eyes are in a photo, the more compelling it will be, because us as humans, we naturally look for eyes to make contact. So there you go. Okay, you could try other things, like getting your camera super low to the ground and point it up, making your subject look really big, right? Really tall. Changing your angle can really add a whole lot more to your photo than you think. So what I would suggest is, oftentimes I do this when I go out and I try to stretch or exercise my creativity. I go out and I just take the first photo that I see, which is typically, for my height is about 5 foot, 9 inches from the ground. I go to snap the photo and I think, okay, now how can I make this photo better? So then I start playing around with angles. I move my body. I get higher. I get lower. I hide behind things like trees. I tell couples oftentimes as a wedding photographer that my job is to put them in beautiful light, and then I just go hide behind something and take pictures of them while they're kissing, which looks really weird to people just like passing by, but that adds interest to the photos, okay? So try it out. Sometimes you have to take boring photos to get an interesting shot. So don't be afraid to go out there and just take a normal photo, or whatever you feel is a normal photo or a boring photo, as long as it pushes you in a direction to take something new. Okay. Step number 4. Okay, so we talked about the first thing that you should be doing, which shouldn't even be a step, is to changing your camera's mode to manual. Okay, and when you're in manual, you are in control of 3 camera settings, and it's the same 3 settings that have been used to take every photo ever. Okay, nothing has changed about these 3 things, okay, except they just keep getting better. But these aren't new subjects. Like, these are still what they were taught 100 years ago when taking photos. You control your lens's aperture, which affects the amount of light that comes in the lens and also affects how much is in focus. You are in control of your shutter speed, which controls how long the light coming into your lens exposes your camera's sensor. And you're also in control of your ISO, which is how sensitive your camera's sensor is to the light that is coming in, okay? So if it's dark outside, you want your sensor to be really sensitive, to really soak up all of the light that it can, okay, even if there's not much. And if it's really bright outside, you want your camera sensor to be less sensitive, because it doesn't need to be working overtime. It can just take in and throw away whatever light it doesn't need. Okay, there's plenty of light to go around for everybody. But for number 4, I want you to learn how to keep your shutter speed up. Okay, so like I just said, oftentimes when it's dark outside or there's a low quantity of light, you can either slow down your shutter speed, which is how long your sensor is exposed to light, okay, which takes the image, or you can raise up your ISO, which is the sensitivity of your sensor. Now, raising up your camera's ISO introduces digital noise like grain. I'm sure that you've seen this plenty of times before when a photo is in like real light. Maybe you'll even see like weird colored dots throughout the photo, and that's just the sensor working really hard to produce something that necessarily isn't there. Like, it's working really hard to pull information out of the tiny amount of light that it is given to make a proper well-lit photo, okay? So what you decide to do instead is slow down your shutter speed. Now, when you slow down your shutter speed, it lets in more light to the camera. So then you think, okay, well, now I'm not introducing any extra digital noise or grain. This is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, the longer that your shutter speed is open, and we're talking like 1/30th of a second, or maybe even 1/60th of a second or slower, now you can introduce movement or blurriness into your photos. So maybe there's been a time where you went to go take a photo like while you were moving or your subject was moving, and things in front of the lens are blurry because you were moving. That is simply because your shutter speed was too low, okay? So keep your shutter speed up, and there's a good rule of thumb, okay? Say that the lens that you have on your camera is a 50 millimeter lens. You want to keep your shutter speed one value above that. So if you have a 50 millimeter lens, your shutter speed value one higher would be a 60th of a second, okay? If you have a 24 millimeter lens, you're going to want to keep your shutter speed at least 1/30th of a second or faster. Okay, I hope that that's not too technical, but you really need to have your camera in front of you and look at these settings while I'm talking about it. Maybe this isn't something that you can listen to as easy in the car as you could as if you had your camera right in front of you and you're looking at your settings, okay? It will make sense, I promise, when you actually hold your camera in your hand and you put in the work to practice this, okay? Where was I going with that? Oh, right. So here's the thing. Say that you have a 50 millimeter lens and you set your shutter speed to 1/60th of a second and your photo is still too dark. What you can do is raise up your ISO, like I talked about. But Raymond, when you raise up your ISO, you're introducing grain or digital noise that isn't very pretty. You're right. And if you don't want to go too high, basically any camera that came out since 2014 can easily go up to ISO 3200 without having any problems as far as ISO performance and digital noise that gets introduced. Take it to 3200, and if you see lots of grain, like I was talking about, then maybe bring it back down to 1600. But just remember, even if your photo is too dark or just a little bit too dark, when you bring it into the computer, you can edit it brighter. You can raise up the brightness, okay? That way, you will still have a properly exposed photo without lowering your shutter speed and introducing blur. Because remember, I guarantee that you would rather have a grainy photo than a blurry photo any day of the week. I promise you that, okay? So don't be afraid to either raise up your ISO or take it into Lightroom on your computer when you go to edit the photo to brighten it up and just keep it dark in the camera. Again, that one was kind of technical. I hope that you're sticking with me. This is really something that now that you have a new camera, something to take seriously and to have your camera in front of you while you're listening to this. I promise you that it will help. Okay, number 5. The number 5 thing that you should do now to get started with your brand new camera is you need to edit and share your photos. I understand how it might be scary to share your photos, right? You just got this new camera, you want to go out and you want to take all these pictures, but you don't want to share them right away because you kind of feel like maybe a fraud or an imposter. Like, well, I haven't really earned the right to call myself a photographer or share these photos because I just got my camera, very recently. And I'm going to tell you that that's BS because you're looking at it wrong. You're looking at it wrong. I was going to try to make it sound nicer than that, but no, you're looking at it wrong, okay? You're not going out there trying to say that you're the world's best photographer. You're not going out there trying to claim that you're a professional and that you charge lots of money for your photos. You just simply want to take better photos of your kids to remember these memories for a long time, okay? And I'm going to tell you a personal story. When I first got into digital photography, like I said, back in, it was either 2007 or early 2008. I'm pretty sure that it was 2007 because I vaguely remember Christmas lights. I was living in LA at the time, so it's not like there had been snow or anything. Anyway, so what I would do is I would go out and I would take photos. I would take a bunch of photos. I would bring them back home. I would load them up into my computer, and at the time we didn't have Lightroom. And Lightroom today is the industry standard when it comes to editing your photos, okay? Especially batch editing photos for like a portrait session or a wedding, more than just one photo, okay? But at the time, all I had was Photoshop. And it was a copy of Photoshop that I got from my school, which was even worse. So what I had to do was I would bring in the photos, I'd put them on my computer, I'd have to open each one individually, decide whether or not I wanted to edit it, put it in a different folder, like drag and drop it into a different folder. And then once I picked out all the ones for my session that I wanted to actually edit, then I would take that folder and I would open each photo individually in Photoshop. And then I would change the brightness, the contrast, shadows, the white balance, sharpness, and then I would export that one photo back into another folder. And then I would open up the next image in Lightroom, do it all over again, over and over and over and over and over. It was a mess. There was no sort of like cataloging system at all, at least not that I knew of at the time. I mean, when I first got the camera, I wasn't taking photography seriously. I wanted to be a cinematographer, so there might have been some sort of, it doesn't matter. I didn't have it. I didn't have it at the time. But thinking back to those photos that I first started taking, they're gone forever. Maybe I might have posted a photo or two on MySpace at the time, but those photos were like 640 by 480, which is like a third of a megapixel when they're uploaded. Tiny, tiny photos. You can't really salvage anything from that. And unfortunately, I don't have the originals because they just took up too much space on my, I think it was like a 60 gigabyte hard drive that I had in my MacBook Pro at the time. So since I didn't share those photos because there wasn't an easy way to do it, and I didn't keep those photos because they took up a lot of storage, and I don't know, lost the hard drive or something, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's just my bad folder organization skills. But regardless, I don't have those photos anymore, and that kind of makes me sad. So learn from my mistake, okay? Because I would love to go back today and edit some of my quote-unquote rejects from back in the day, because maybe they're not rejects today. Just in the past few years, I've gone back and looked at some of the weddings that I've shot, say even in just like 2014, and looked at my rejects and thought, well, actually, I kind of like that one. I bet that I could edit this one in a way that could really be a stunner. And I don't have that opportunity with my first photos that I had. So learn to edit, especially in Lightroom, because it catalogs all your photos. It keeps them all in one place. The organization is super easy, and share your photos just in case anything happens. It's also great to be able to reflect on your growth, seeing how far you've come in any given amount of time. I don't have that. I just kind of have to trust that I've gotten better, and I don't know. I think that I have. Anyway, that's it. Those are my 5 tips for getting started with your brand new camera. Remember, the first one, don't use the flash that's built into your camera. It doesn't look good. Learn to see the light. Look at photos in a magazine, whatever, the internet. Try to figure out where the main source of light is coming from, and pay attention to the face. See if there's any weird shadows or light or anything like that. Number 3, change your angle. Get on somebody's level. Move the camera around. Play with it, because that is how you're going to get something interesting. And once you realize that, you're going to be looking in photos of magazines and realize like, oh, none of these are taken at just like a stock height or like a standard height. These are all something different. Next, keep your shutter speed up, okay? Because a grainy photo is better than a blurry photo any day of the week. I'm serious. Like, I'm not even going to talk about aperture here, even though that's arguably one of the biggest, that's going to create one of the biggest changes in your photography right away once you learn what that is. I'm not even going to mention it here because I really think that shutter speed is so much more important in the beginning, okay? And number 5, edit and share your photos. I just can't say that enough, really. Being able to share your work, even if not for the recognition, just being able to see your growth is hugely helpful. So that's it, guys. Guess what? I told you in the beginning to change your camera to start shooting in manual right away. And you may not even know what manual means, right? Why is every picture I'm taking just coming out black and dark? I don't know what I'm doing here. I got your back. This is the Beginner Photography Podcast. This isn't the, hey, I'm just going to talk to you for a while podcast and not help you about anything actually photography related at all podcast. I'm here to help you. So if you want to know how to shoot in manual, if you want to know more of this, right? This was just 5 tips. if you head over to the beginnerphotographypodcast.com, up at the top, there's a banner, and you can click on it, and you will be able to sign up for our free 14-day video course called Photography Basics for Beginners. 14 days to better photos. And what it is it is a video course that will be, a new video is going to be emailed to you every single day within a topic or technique that is going to help you get started taking better photos right away. I'm going to talk about those things like aperture to help you learn how to take more compelling photos. We're going to talk about the entire exposure triangle, and we're even going to get into more interesting stuff like composition, and just wait until you get into that. So again, if you're interested in that, head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the banner link at the top and sign up right away. Guys, that's it. If this is your first episode that you've listened to of the Beginner Photography Podcast, again, thank you so much for joining me. I can't thank you enough for coming along on and inviting the Beginner Photography Podcast along on your journey. I'm truly happy that you're here, and I really hope that you will continue listening on. And if this is your 81st episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast, thank you so much for keeping up with us. And even if you didn't just buy a new camera, I really hope that you got some great useful information out of today's episode. And if you did, be sure to head over to Facebook and search for the Beginner Photography Podcast to join our secret Facebook group with other beginners just like yourself who just want help. It's a free and safe place to ask any questions that you have. We're all on a different point in our photography journey, and the point of the Facebook group is to help cultivate your interest and your growth as well, without being any sort of, without introducing any sort of weirdness or entitlement. So that's it. Again, facebook.com, you know it, you've been there before. Just search for Beginner Photography Podcast and request to join the group. That's it, guys. Again, welcome to 2018. We made it. We're here. We're alive. And get out there. Keep shooting. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. I love you all, and I will see you next week. Later.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.